welcome to episode 1 of On the Lime. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Will.
And this week we sat down and had a really good conversation with our buddy Andrew. Now, you may know him by his YouTube name, Nintendrew.
Andrew has over 250,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel alone, which is based on retro game collecting. He's got 7,000 followers on Instagram and over 26,000 followers on Twitter. It was really interesting to sit down and talk to him and just learn how he built that group and that following and how he maintains it.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Andrew is I've known him for a while. He grew up in this area, and it's so cool to have someone from the Southern Kentucky area who's made it big and has like a totally new perspective on something that is outside my wheelhouse entirely. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear him talk about how to grow a YouTube channel and what to do with that following once you have it.
Yeah, and a lot of great tips that I think everybody's going to be able to apply to their day-to-day marketing. We kind of were like talking about it, and since we're trying to keep these a little shorter, we're thinking of different ways that we can kind of get to know a person, just like 3 I statements, I guess we call them. So just like simply 3 things that kind of define you, or maybe it might be something fun to know about you. Do you have those prepared by chance?
Yeah, I don't have full sentences, I don't think, but like I've always had like my cookie cutter personality traits are I love video games, cats, and food. So
that works.
That's fair.
I'm a huge Nintendo nerd. I have 3 cats at home, and I like food. I like to try new things in the kitchen. I don't know.
Oh, so you cook food and do all that as well? Yeah,
sometimes. You know,
yeah.
But my guilty pleasure is like reality TV show cooking competitions.
Okay, so like what is it? British Bake Off and stuff like that. I mean, do you
like Hell's Kitchen and MasterChef and all that?
What about Chopped?
Yeah, Chopped is great.
See, I like Chopped.
I think it would be really fun to do like a Chopped challenge among like our friends or the people here at Sublime. Like
yeah.
Put like some weird stuff in a basket.
Yeah.
You gotta do something with it.
I do like MasterChef a lot, and like the guy who won, I guess 2 seasons ago, maybe now, he's from Louisville, and he used to work at, like his wife used to work at WBKO with me.
Oh.
They got married on MasterChef last season.
Weird.
Yeah, like
cool.
They did that whole thing where like they come back and cater, cater our wedding, and like the chefs have to do the team challenge and all that. So,
what kind of foods do you like to eat?
My favorites are always like Nashville hot chicken. I will go down to Nashville to get Nashville hot chicken some weeks. Yeah.
So is it Hattie B's, Prince's?
I have gravitated towards Hattie B's. That's always
okay. I've never been
my go-to.
I've never been to Hattie B's.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I just
it's like an hour from here.
Well, no. I go to Hot Chicken when I'm down there, but like the Hattie B's, the line is always just kind of off-putting. Maybe I need to find like the right time to hit there.
Like
so
2:30.
Yeah.
But now, I just from knowing you in the past, like previously before this interview, you have a secret for Hattie B's. Like you can get the chicken.
That's right. Yeah. So the Hattie B's, for those who don't know, stands for Hattie Bishop. That's the family is the Bishop family. So there's also another restaurant down in Franklin, Tennessee called Bishop's Meat and Three. And for those who aren't in the local culture, Meat and Three is just kind of like a almost like a buffet style place, but you go through a line sort of like Subway or any sort of fast casual place, and you pick your meat and 3 sides, and that's your meal. And so there's Bishop's Meat and Three has the same recipe hot chicken as Hattie B's does, but it's just kind of like the locals will congregate there, so like nobody really knows the secret. So if you want to go and not wait in an hour-long line, you can hit up Bishop's and it's the exact same food. So.
And where is that? Is that in Nashville as well?
It's in Franklin, so just right outside of Nashville.
Okay. Yeah. Just a little further drive, but you don't have to wait as long, you know?
Secret tips with Nintendrew. So how hot do you go?
It depends on the company, honestly, because I feel like half the fun of eating spicy food is kind of the adrenaline rush, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm with a big group of people, I know that I can handle, whatever they'll throw at me, so I'll go for the hottest of hot. But if I'm just going for like a nice lunch, I'll go for, just regular hot or something like that.
Yeah.
So do you want to like show off when you're around other people? Like, is it that? Or
not,
is it
no. I'm not trying to like impress anybody, but it's like it's a personal rush, I guess.
Yeah.
To I don't know. Maybe that sounds like it's showing off, but maybe it is.
No.
And you kind of briefly, I don't know which one touched on Nintendrew, but I just figured we should probably say that that's kind of your thing, right? Nintendrew,
Yeah.
that's what you do.
Yeah. I was working as a game programmer for about 5 years out of college, and then my last position in game programming, I was laid off in February, I think, of 2017, I want to say. And I had just started to work on my YouTube stuff, and as I was looking for other game programming jobs, nothing was showing up, and my YouTube started to kind of take off at the same time. So at some point I was just like, I guess this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. And so that's kind of when that I guess that was kind of going to be one of my questions is like, what was the turning point in which you saw this like actually working? Like, was there one big like monumentous thing that you're like, oh wow, you're starting to see numbers rise, or like this is something that you could pursue as just like your full-time gig, or like when was that kind of clicked for you?
Well, there's a couple different turning points, I think, because I started on YouTube. My channel I started back in 2006, like very close to when YouTube had first opened the gates. And I just kind of used it as my own personal video Dropbox for almost a decade of just like, if I just made something, I'd toss it up there. I wasn't ever trying to make a presence or make a channel. But when I was in college, I started working on animations, like 3D animations for the game Team Fortress 2.
Okay.
So I used the assets from the game and kind of made little machinima type videos. And that was a whole subculture of YouTube for a while. And I had one or two videos that sort of took off, maybe on the order of like 150,000 views, something like that.
Wow.
And that was enough to build up a viewer base of about 1,500 subscribers. And then when I decided to start doing Nintendo and gaming stuff in general, that was toward the end of 2016. And so I had a base of close to 2,000 people that were ready to kind of consume that content. So, and obviously, some people will fall off because it's not anything like what the content I was making before. But when I did this whole rebrand, I at least had the little foundation. So that's where I started. And I think the first video that I uploaded that was in that space was just a 2016 game room tour. And because the thing was, I had I think a photo album that I was sharing around of just pictures of the game room that I had set up in my apartment. And a lot of people were like, oh, this is really cool. I want to see more of what's there. So I was like, oh, this will be easier if I just make a video for it. And so it was something that I was kind of intending to just share with friends or acquaintances to be able to show, like, this is the kind of setup I've got going on. And I think it ended up hitting something around 25,000 views in the first few weeks. And for somebody with 1,500 subscribers, that was a big deal. So I was like, okay, I got something that's working here. So.
Yeah, you do have a cool setup, too.
Yeah, your collection is pretty epic. Whenever anyone asks me, like, oh, well, what is this Nintendrew dude that you're friends with? Like, what is he all about? I think my first answer is like, well, like he's a Nintendo collector, but what's like the most impressive thing for me is that you have every single N64 game ever, right?
Yeah, well, in America.
Okay,
the American games,
including Clay Fighter's Sculptor's Cut, which that doesn't mean anything to me. But I've paid attention to you.
Yeah. She's referring to the rarest game in the library. It was a Blockbuster exclusive. So
really,
I think it's not exactly sure, or it's not certain how many copies are out there, but it's somewhere between like 5 and 20,000, which is phenomenally low for a game of that era.
And I'm sure not all of them were treated that well since they were like going through the Blockbuster ranks.
You can imagine how difficult it is to find a box, because that's also the era of like cardboard boxes.
Yeah, exactly.
So most of them just threw them out.
Yeah.
Do you have a box for that one?
No.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite thing in your collection then?
It's hard to say. You can define it in a bunch of different ways. I guess like right now, what I'm using the most is just my Switch. And I know that's a simple answer. Like, you can go buy a Switch at Walmart, but
but that's what stuff's being made for now too. Yeah. So you kind of gravitate towards that since the most new content's coming out on that.
Yeah. I've got like a couple sentimental things. Like I have a box copy of Super Mario 64 that was signed by Charles Martinet, the voice of Mario.
Oh wow.
So that's probably one that's one I've got kind of in the center of my display.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I've got, I honestly don't have a huge collection compared to a lot of my peers on the platform. I think I'm still under 2,000 total titles, which, there's some collectors up there that have 10,000 or more games in their sets. But I've always focused on trying to present everything in a way that's visually appealing, but also not just like completely cluttered to where you feel kind of claustrophobic. So I've always designed my studios as a game room first, like a nice place to hang out, and then as a studio second.
Well, I feel like that's kind of what pulls people in too, is that aesthetic. Because you do have it set up that way where it catches people's eye. It's kind of like, I don't mean to lump you in with this. I don't know what your thoughts are, but like Good Mythical Morning, like they have that cool setup and that cool aesthetic to it that you just kind of, you get intrigued by, oh, these people put time into their set. You know, you don't see that as often, and I think that gives you credit as a YouTuber as well. And I think that that's kind of makes it easier to invest in your channel, which is nice.
Yeah, I think as far as just raw time spent, I've probably spent the most time on YouTube on Good Mythical Morning, just watching. At least at one point, I had watched all their episodes up through season 14 or something like that, and that was a huge part of. They'll say on their show, the part of your daily routine, right? And I think that's a good. That was a big point of inspiration for trying to build a visually interesting set. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do you think that that's something that takes you from, you know, like a pretty good personality on YouTube to like being kind of elevated?
I think the biggest thing that people underestimate is just general production values. Because like when I first started, I built a subscriber base in excess of 25,000 subs without spending any more than maybe $25 on equipment. Because I mean, there's so many people who will just, you know, turn on a webcam and record their thoughts. But if you take a little extra time to sort of polish your visuals, it can really make an exponential difference. So when I first started, I used my cell phone, which was a Galaxy S6 at the time, to record my video. I had 2 $7 gooseneck clamp lamps from Walmart for my lighting. Like I used as a key and a fill light, and then I had I think a $5 Rock Band USB mic that I was using for my microphone.
Wow.
So that was a very cheap setup, but it's better than just using, you know, your laptop's built-in webcam and microphone, you know.
Exactly.
And that takes less than a couple hours to get everything set up, and really looks a lot better than it should, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely
does.
Just
getting started.
And just aside from even the sets, I mean, when you are, you know, you're trying to catch somebody's attention when they're scrolling past, and I guess, so I mean, I know that there's been a lot of talk, especially lately, about like thumbnails, and do you give any thought to that as well when you're branding yourself?
Yeah, the thumbnail is the first point of contact you have with any potential viewer, specifically on YouTube. Now, when you go to other platforms like Facebook and Twitter, it can be a little more complicated. You're looking more at like the first 5 to 7 seconds of your video, but on YouTube, the thumbnail is crucial. It is more important. It might sound kind of bleak, but it is more important than the content of the video for how well it will perform. So that is a huge part. A lot of people will sort of gawk or chuckle at my figure of I'll spend anywhere between 1 or 2 hours on a thumbnail for a video, but that's just because it is that important for long-term exposure.
I mean, what goes through your head when you're doing it? Like, as far as like, are you looking at text treatments, or do you have a standard text that you use for everything, or is it just kind of like, do you try to brand it specifically to a game you're reviewing, or?
Well, there's definitely a methodology of trying to keep a consistent visual style, because even if you don't have the space, like the visual real estate for a logo or something like that to build brand awareness, it's important for people to be able to glance at a thumbnail and know that this is your video.
Yeah.
So I think I've talked before about trying to build a consistent visual deck of assets. So for me, I have one font that I use for everything. I always put the same stroke and drop shadow on it. I try to use, in my case, I have a consistent direction of like these bright poppy primary colors.
Yeah.
And I usually try to include a kind of hero image of like the whatever I'm talking about right in the center, and then have everything else kind of faded in the background, but still have a high saturation, high contrast on it. In my experience, things tend to stick out more if you've got at least if your thumbnail has at some point on your image you have a true white and a true black color, where you've actually got like if it were to be desaturated, that you'd still be able to kind of pick out everything. That helps for viewers that are colorblind, as well as just people who are scrolling past as quickly as possible. And then, you know, I have a sort of test that I run on a lot of my thumbnails, which is to size it down to the size that YouTube displays it at, and then to give it a blur and desaturate it. And if I can still read the text or make out whatever the object is, I know that it is solid enough that if somebody is just kind of like, it's in their periphery and they're running through the pages, they'll be able to, it might catch their attention.
That's great information.
Yeah, for sure. So what are some things that maybe you've seen other YouTubers do, and definitely don't name names, but that might get on your nerves?
Well, I think the biggest thing that's been on my mind recently is it definitely does bother me to see so many people trying to capitalize specifically on negativity or drama. There are a lot of people that will kind of base their entire channel or their entire presence on, in my opinion, tearing other people down.
Yeah.
I think for me, and I know that this is not right for everybody, so I'm not suggesting that everybody do this, but as an example, in my capacity, I have the opportunity to review a lot of games that are sent to me. Mm-hmm. If I end up getting an indie game in that doesn't strike me in the right way, or I just didn't have a good time with it, I tend to not cover it at all. I'm not in the business of trying to badmouth somebody who's put their time and effort into something, but rather I'll go back to the people that sent it to me and give them my own impressions, and allow them to try to be a bit more constructive rather than blasting somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So I generally try to focus on the positivity and try to uplift things that I think are really worth celebrating, rather than trying to get involved in tearing other people down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it helps develop the YouTube community as well. I mean, and that's the environment, I think a lot of us, unfortunately, are fighting against the other, you mentioned, but yeah, that's the best way to keep it.
I think as long as there's not a situation where somebody is actively being hurt or like disenfranchised, I don't see any reason to speak out against something that is not your favorite.
Yeah.
So I just try to ignore the things that are not in my sphere and kind of focus on propping up the things that I think should be celebrated.
That's great.
Yeah, I love that advice for sure. You mentioned that you talk to people and they ask you for reviews. That's not something that I've seen a lot of content from you, like on your channel. I know that's not really a focus of your channel.
Sure.
But people see you. I guess what I'm getting at is people see you as an influencer.
Yep.
What is that like?
Well, you mentioned that I don't have a lot of review content on YouTube, and mostly that's just because it doesn't seem to perform too well anymore. There's been 10 years of just the basic YouTube unboxing, so I try to focus on content that's a little bit more unique. As an example, there was a product that I was interested in a couple of years back that was a wireless arcade fight pad for Switch. And as I was looking at it, I was thinking, this would be really cool to include in a modular arcade machine where I could build an arcade machine version of a Switch and put these things into it. And I kept on that idea, and I was like, I could just build a dock that's basically built into a full-size arcade cabinet. Mm-hmm. And so that's where this idea, that's one of my more popular videos, came from, was from this fight stick. And so I reached out to the company and I was like, hey, do you want to send me a couple of these that I can put into this project? And for me, that's a more unique way to try to include something like that. Talk about something that I found interesting, but also show something that you might not find it on another channel. Mm-hmm. As far as just the general influencer space, I guess, for me, I try to focus more on my YouTube channel. I'll talk more about retrospectives or weird parts of gaming history. Mm-hmm. I try not to load it up too much with unboxings and reviews, just because I know that's what people get everywhere else. Yeah. But it has made it an interesting. It's made an interesting situation where I've started to build up more of a community on Twitter and Instagram and sort of some of these other social networks that aren't quite nearly as big as my YouTube following. But there is a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot of people who I think that just follow me on Twitter or just follow me on Instagram and aren't over on the YouTube space. And I kind of take a personal and targeted approach at each of those different platforms. So if I have people who will approach me about their new indie game on Switch, my general answer is hey, I try not to do full reviews anymore, but if you're interested, I'll take a look at it, and if it really catches my eye, I'll talk on Twitter about it, or try to spread that with the people who are following me outside of the YouTube.
I love that you mentioned that every platform kind of has its own purpose. Yeah. What's your favorite platform outside of YouTube, and I guess why is that?
Definitely Twitter right now.
Yeah.
I used to hate Twitter. I didn't understand it at all back when Facebook was the hot stuff. I was just like, Twitter's just Facebook with less features. Why would I use it? And now, after that was prior to any sort of audience. Now that I have an audience, it kind of makes sense. It's okay. It seems to me it's more geared towards current news, current content, or current topics. Mm-hmm. It's a more fleeting space, I think. But that's nice for just little. Whereas a brand would have to be very particular about what they would be putting out on other platforms, that you wouldn't want to have a dud of a YouTube video, because that could mean a real impact on revenue for a given month. Like if you just tweet something out, like it's
Nothing.
gone in an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing that with like even the corporations that are getting involved in Twitter with like the Wendy's and IHOP and all
Yeah.
that. I feel like they can have a little bit more fun with that.
Wendy's Twitter is one of my absolute favorites. They're like so good at the clapback.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Have you ever had to put money on anything, like when you were getting your start, like as far as like boosting any videos, or I mean, is that ever anything you did or used at first?
Yeah, I started, when I first started out, I had a routine of boosting every new video that I had on Facebook ads for about $10, I think, for each upload.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're first starting out, I think that can be a good avenue for getting new eyeballs on your stuff. It doesn't make much sense for me anymore, just because I kind of have that basic level of people. But when you're just getting started out, if you have something that you think people will be interested in, it can be helpful to be able to reach new people that way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can, because it's, specifically with Facebook ads, that's what I'm familiar with. It's easy to just put your own budget of $5 to $10 on video.
Simple.
And it might not lead to that many views immediately, but if you've got say you spend $10 and then it gets to 20 more people, those people have there's fallout from that. They might share it with their friends, which can lead to a sort of exponential snowball.
Yeah, the old they tell two people and they tell two people. No, that's good.
So how do you then, you get your following, how do you keep people? I mean, of course, you produce good content, but I think that you're really good at maintaining like a sense of community. But what's the strategy behind that?
Yeah, I think one thing that's very important is to try to make sure that while you don't want to keep yourself in a box, you do want to make sure that people can reliably predict the sort of content they can expect from you. Mm-hmm. So I found it helpful when I first started out to define my basic goals, I guess, with the channel. So my content generally falls into, I think it's one of 3 categories I had written out at some point. It's like retrospectives, or like top 5s, top 10s, product reviews, and like DIY or how-to videos, but all kind of in the sphere of retro video game collecting. And so with those topics, I try to space them out equally, where I'm not going to have just one month where I only do unboxings or only do top 5s or something like that. I kind of try to schedule it out in such a way that if somebody is only there for one particular subset of my videos, that they'll be satisfied every month.
Yeah.
But as far as trying to interact with the community, I think one thing is that I recommend to people on YouTube is it doesn't matter whether you have 10 subscribers or a million. You can take the time to take 30 minutes or an hour after you upload a video to run through the comments as they come in, and put a heart on a comment that adds to the conversation, or add your own personal reply to a few. And even if if you've got way too many people to respond to, which comes earlier than you might expect, you can still have, if you're responding to a handful of the most dedicated viewers that are there when they first show up, that can really help to solidify that sort of connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of my like adages as a social media manager is social media is social. Mm-hmm. So if you're running an account for a business or like your personal brand, you have to have, it's a conversation. You have to have both sides of that.
Yeah, because that's ultimately what that forum is for, is having a line of communication. So it needs to go both ways. Yeah,
for sure.
We kind of, I don't know exactly the best way to word this, but I mean, just to kind of put a bow in things, or bow on things, on things. What, you've been doing this for a while. If there's one thing that you would say is the most effective thing that you've done in branding yourself, or branding your channel. Yeah,
or like a piece of advice that you've received, or a book that you've read, something that's really been effective in making you who you are and boosting your success to where it is now.
Yeah. I've said this at a few different panel discussions I've had and stuff, and it might seem, I'm not sure exactly where this came from, or if it was something that was just kind of organically rose from the time that I've spent on YouTube. But I think one of the things I try to keep with me is it's easy to get caught up in trying to make something that you think people will enjoy, rather than trying to make something that you would enjoy. I think if people could only take one piece of advice from me, I would say that you should try to think about the sort of content that you consume, the sort of videos that you like to watch, the sort of stuff that you like to engage with. Ask yourself what sort of topics or what avenues they haven't explored that you wish that they would, and then you can fill that gap yourself. So for me, one of my biggest inspirations was the channel Metal Jesus Rocks on YouTube. He's up in Seattle. He's kind of the head of the retro collecting scene over there. And so that was one of my big inspirations for getting started. And that some of the first videos that I made were on the rarest games for a particular system. And that was always a topic that I wished that he would cover. I was like, oh man, he always talks about, these hidden gems. I wish he would talk about what are the top 5 most expensive titles on this platform or whatever, because, that was always most interesting to me at the time. So I was like, well, I can do that. I have, I was working on my 64 collection at the time. I was like, I can, talk about this sort of subset. And I think that is something that I still try to carry today is instead of trying to craft something that the audience will respond to, I think you should try to build something that you would consume as a viewer. And inevitably, as long as you're, there will be people who will have your same interests and will come along and have the same sort of sensibilities about your hobbies or whatever it is that you're covering. So I say try to see what your heroes or your inspiration is doing and fill the gaps that they might leave.
It probably makes it easier for you to keep going as well, because you're ultimately doing stuff that you want to do.
Especially in a space like YouTube, you want to make sure that you keep that passion alive. So you got to make sure that you're excited about whatever you're working on, because it can come through easily to a viewer if you're not full in on it.
yeah, for sure. I love that.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, I mean, I'm happy.
I am too.
I'm happy with that. I think you've said some great stuff.
Yeah.
And just so everybody knows, I mean, we didn't really fully introduce you in the beginning, but your channel, I mean, if anybody wants to take a look at anything you've done. Yeah,
it's just youtube.com/Nintendrew. It's like Nintendo and Andrew smashed together.
Nice.
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm Nintendrew_ because some jerk took my @
Uh-oh.
Same thing on Instagram, Nintendrew YT. So got a little fragmenting on my social media presence, but if you go to my youtube.com/Nintendrew, it's got links to everything as well there. But.
Awesome. Well, we thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
So that was our conversation with Andrew, better known as Nintendrew. Again, thanks so much for him coming on the Lime this week.
Yeah, I mean, he had so much great information. I really liked what he was talking about with the thumbnail image, because, I mean, in making videos and really even just curating your Instagram or the way your aesthetic is, I mean, that's something that not a lot of people think about, and something as easy as a thumbnail, just putting a little extra thought in it can get more viewers or more reactions.
Right. I'm sure, like, a lot of people hearing him say that the thumbnail is more important than the video content, like, that's pretty controversial to say, but I mean, I get where he's coming from, because if there's a crappy thumbnail on a YouTube video, I'm not gonna watch it.
Yeah, the best videos are the ones that are watched, and you got to get them to watch them first.
Yeah, it seems like he does a really good job of that too. So in 2 weeks, on the 21st, we will be sitting down with Dr. Corey Morell Martin. She's the Executive Director of Marketing and Public Relations for MedCenter Health. Corey is one of my dearest friends and probably one of the best mentors that I've ever had. We sat down with her and had a great conversation on marketing and social media and what's coming up for 2020.
I think authenticity and recognizing the individual instead of the huge group of people you're trying to reach out to, but talking as if you're talking to one person, I don't necessarily think that's a trend. I think that's the way it should be done.
So that's coming up on the next episode of On the Line. Thanks for listening to episode 1, and we'll see you next time.